Hello, everyone. It is Will and Carter back again. Hope your week has started off as well as it can be, being a Monday and all that. Today, we are here to talk about the one and only Evil Geniuses roster and how they're going to be faring. And since we just spoke about FlyQuest, I believe, in our last video, I think I personally want to start off with Ignar. But Carter, what you thinking about right now?
Yeah, so Evil Geniuses, just kind of give over the history of the Geniuses, are one of the, I believe, maybe the newest team in the league. I think this past year we saw the introduction of Evil Geniuses and Immortals, and
Mm,
Immortals has been in the league before. So, but Evil Geniuses, meanwhile, hasn't been in the league since like I think season 3 and before. So the
yeah.
Geniuses kind of came onto the scene, did surprisingly well given that they were a new team. That being said, towards the end of the summer, there's a little bit of weirdness in the Evil Geniuses with some roster experimentation. They initially fielded a roster of it was Kumo in the top lane, Svenskeren in the mid lane, Jizuke bot lane, and then it was Zazel and the former SKT AD carry Bang. Eventually, they would trade out their mid laner and top laner for Golden Glue and Huni, respectively, which didn't really work out if you're looking at the numbers. But
Hmm.
going into this next season, they're kind of replacing a lot of the pieces of their old roster. And if we're going to start, like Will has mentioned, with Ignar, that is one of the definitive upgrades Evil Geniuses has made.
Yeah.
For sure, Zazel is a really strong player. No one's like doubting that. He was on the C9 roster for a while before they signed Vulcan. Zazel's really good, but he's just not Ignar. Let's just like make clear, Ignar is one of the best supports in the league right now. He's also one of these kind of elusive import supports, and like if you're importing a guy into a role, you're gonna do it for a reason because he is consuming one of those all important import slots. And Ignar, we've seen time and time again popping up through the support role, as funny as that is to say. He's got a lot of flexibility in his champion pool. He's got really great game knowledge. He's also one of the best roaming supports in the league, and I love Evil Genius's signing Ignar.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ignar is a huge piece of this puzzle, and most importantly, I think he's there to help Deftly as we start off with this team here because Deftly himself has had kind of a rough track record, especially when you compare him to his lane partner here. He was on Golden Guardians, and then the Academy, and then the C9 Academy, which is a better academy, and then
Yeah,
Cloud9 there for a moment, and then
I
back
mean,
down to Academy for EG. So definitely is good enough where he's gotten up to pro play a few times now. But the question is he learning enough each time he does this that he's going to start staying in pro play, staying as the lead part of this team? And I just don't. I'm not sure about it. To be honest, Evil Geniuses as a team kind of scares me. At least if we're looking at the bot lane role, because Ignar can only do so much. I think Ignar is great, but I think, as you said, we're gonna be looking for him to be that roaming support that we really know he is. And if you're looking for kind of a jungler to work with as a roaming support, Sven
you got
Skaren's really a good
Svenskeren.
jungler to work with. To be
Yeah,
honest with you.
Svenskeren is one of the best junglers in the league. Svenskeren has 3 titles under his belt from his
Yep.
TSM days, and even since his TSM days has, I think, by most people's accounts, gotten better ever since he won those titles. He was kind of
Yeah.
placed on a less successful roster, all in all, on C9. But that's not to say that any of C9's faults were Svenskeren's fault. Svenskeren is a really, really strong aggressive jungler. He shows really good intuition and pathing, which is one thing that a lot of junglers at a high level are. It kind of defines how good a jungler is. Like one of
Yeah.
the best, most important parts is pathing, and Svenskeren has really interesting pathing that people don't always like understand immediately, but eventually throughout a game, you can always kind of start to understand why Svenskeren paths the way he does. He's also so aggressive, and regardless of whether it's always to his benefit or to his demise, it's so fun to watch, right? And it kind of lends this kind of is explosiveness to the Evil Geniuses roster. You have Ignar, a really, really, really good roaming support with a really, really deep champion pool and a huge
Hmm.
willingness to play champions who are not normally considered good in
Yeah.
the support role. Ignar, we mentioned this before in a conversation we had previously, has played Fervor of Battle Leona against SKT to a win. Has played, I remember in the summer finals in particular, I don't know if it was summer finals, but in the summer playoffs, played a Gragas support game that he got some dirty, dirty invades off of. So
Yep.
kind of pairing Ignar with Svenskeren, both of these two high tempo, aggressive roaming pieces, lends this kind of explosiveness to the Evil Geniuses roster all around the map that I think is only kind of aided if you're talking about making an explosive explosive roster
Yeah.
by their coin flippy mid laner Jizuke over here.
That's what I was gonna say. If we're talking about explosive, I think we have to bring it up.
Yeah.
Jizuka here has some of the most ridiculous stats on both really good and really bad games. I think I was looking at this stat the other day. He has a KDA just range in the LCS Summer last year of 0.17 KDA all the way to a 22 KDA in the same season, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Granted, those are two different champions. The prior was Karma off of one game, Corky's the latter off of 2 games, and maybe he's just really good at Corky. But I mean, what?
Yeah, like it's weird. Like I think it's kind of fair to say that Jizuke is the most aggressive mid laner in the league. He is
Yeah.
so aggressive, and sometimes that aggression is really to his benefit and really to his team's benefit. When Evil Geniuses have succeeded in their past roster, a lot of the times it was through Jizuke carrying. Jizuke loves to play assassins too. I know Jizuke loves his Echo,
Yep.
but him being a very aggressive player sometimes is to his detriment. Sometimes he's aggressing on champions like Karma, and Karma's a great
Hmm.
champion, but it's not necessarily meant to be played as an aggressive lane bully. And maybe some iterations of Karma are meant to be played that way. But the
Yeah.
point being, Jizuke will play aggressive, whether he's playing a champion who is meant to be aggressive or a champion who really needs to play passively. And so
Hmm.
he's just kind of, like I mentioned, this super duper coin flippy player in which you never really know what you're going to get out of him, which, while maybe inconsistent and while maybe a little scary for the Evil Geniuses, is probably equally as scary to go up against. Like, you
Yeah.
never know if Jizuke is going to go crazy against Power of Evil or Jensen. I mean, I would not give him the benefit of the doubt in that regard, but you just kind of never know which iteration of Jizuke is going to be showing up on a given day. And
Yeah.
that just makes him so scary. Not to mention, if maybe Evil Geniuses, with if they're re-signing this player, they clearly have some faith that they have the ability to harness this really strong Jizuke. Because if they didn't like think that there was merit to keeping Jizuke around, they would have just dropped him, like
Oh,
full discretion.
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
clearly,
And one of the merits of having Jizuke right now as well, which we can't forget, is that he and Sven Skaren are the only pieces on this team that have stayed constant, right?
yes.
They're the only pieces that are actually used to each other. And if we're talking about Sven Skaren being really fun to watch because of his jungle pathing, that could set him apart in a year where we might see some of the best on average jungling across the LCS, right? That might set him apart yet again as one of the top tier junglers. Match with Jizuke, who might just come out and be overly aggressive and somehow match that weird playstyle that people won't know how to address with Svenskeren. And if they're kind of more in sync than they were last year, I don't see it going poorly, especially with Ignar coming up to mid lane to deal with it as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I definitely agree on that point. And like Jizuke, we were talking back on our TSM video about Power of Evil and how Power of Evil is not really the kind of mid laner who loves to roam around. Jizuke loves to get in other lanes. Jizuke will
mhm,
mess up anyone he sees the opportunity to mess up. So you look at this roster, right? You have Ignar, loves moving around the map. Jizuke loves moving around the map. Svenskeren, whose job it is to roam around the map. And like I mentioned, you have this kind of explosiveness to the Evil Geniuses roster that maybe each individual where maybe each individual component isn't outpacing their respective components.
yeah.
Like I think Jizuke is good. I don't think he's Perks good. I don't think he's
Mhm,
Jensen good. I don't
mhm,
think he's Power of Evil good. I
mhm.
think Ignar's good. I don't think he's Vulcan good. I don't think he's Core JJ good. I don't think he's Sword Art good. But like what you have instead is the super explosive roster who can explode wherever they want to on the map, which makes
Yeah.
them so scary to play against if they're playing in their peaks.
Yeah, absolutely. And if Ignar brings anything to the table, it might be some of that flag quest from last year where they out of
Yeah.
nowhere became a top tier team in those playoffs. I know they lost at the end, but I mean, by God,
Yeah.
except for the plot armor that TSM had in those playoffs, they looked like they were going to be first place, and they still showed up as one of the best in world. So if
Yeah.
Ignar can translate that to help Jizuke in any way, I think this could be huge. And what's great about this, if we have three very explosive lanes, definitely might be the fifth best player on this roster, as you like to say it.
That is fair.
We have Impact in the top lane, who I know you and I have been talking about how much we love carry top laners right now as an
Yeah.
idea and where it's coming from. But that might not be what evil geniuses need here. They might need impact to be impact. Play the
Yeah,
Shen, play the maybe not Renekton's kind of a carry, but play the Ornn especially. I
yeah.
think Ornn's in a pretty good place, and really just be available and be a meat shield when needed.
Yeah,
Um,
so we're talking about all these explosive players. Impact is not an explosive player, but that doesn't necessarily mean Impact is like a bad player, mind you.
oh, by far the
Impact is a former world champion.
yeah
Impact is a four-time LCS winner. Impact still is one of the best top laners in the league, arguably better than a player like Licorice. And like that's a debate to be had, but he's in the
yeah
conversation of being better. He's one of the best that the league has to offer. And pairing Impact with all these kind of explosive players, in some ways, I'm going back and forth on this rather. In some ways, it makes a lot of sense because if you're going to be having so many explosive pieces to your roster, having
mhm,
one player who is going to be consistent throughout, who you can really, really count on to always be there and be available to be helping the team, is really, really good.
yeah
That being said, Impact does not match, like I mentioned, he's a consistent player. He does not match that same level of explosiveness that the rest of this roster
yeah
has. And if like the evil genius's way to win games against teams that are quote unquote better than them will be to explode on the map, you're probably not getting that with Impact. Liquid kind of tried to harness that in Impact. He had more carry top laner games on Team Liquid than he ever had on SKT, on Cloud9, on other teams. It's
yeah
definitely the kind of thing where like Impact will play whatever he needs to play in the meta, but Impact much prefers tanks that can make an impact through crowd control, and that's very good for team fighting. It is not necessarily the best for, as we say, exploding around the map. Mind
yeah
you, there are tanks that are good at that. You have tanks like Shen, for example, who that's kind of Shen's whole thing. He has map
yeah
impact, and Impact loves to
absolutely.
play Shen. So this really could go either way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one beautiful thing about that is that we could see impact in a way, and you can't be too obvious about this every game, right? But as good as Svenskeren is, I think you can't be in every lane every time and still keep up and farm. So you have the sack lane in a way, and maybe it's not like a
Hmm.
hard sack lane, but I think if you leave a former world champ and multiple
Yeah,
LCS title holder alone as a tank that still does tank things if they're 0 and 5, they might
yeah,
have a strategy if they really need to, let that one loose against a given team like this year's Cloud9, for example, when you need to devote so many more resources to keeping perks down, or TSM with Power of Evil, as you mentioned, or Team Liquid with Jensen, right? These are people that if Jizuke does pop off against, he might shut the game down, which would be hilarious. But can you get him there? And I think leaving Impact alone is an ability to get there. As weird as that dichotomy might seem, I'm totally with you.
no. It's
Um,
totally fair. And like you say it's a sack lane. I don't necessarily think that Svensker not going top is like means that they're sacking the lane. I think kind of the benefit to signing Impact is
mhm,
that you know that he's going to be able to generate his own advantages through really good wave management, through really, really good play. Impact,
yeah,
and like back when he was on Cloud9 in particular, is super famous for quote unquote top die, where he can just get solo kills out of nowhere. And Impact in modern days has been solo killed before. I won't say that Impact is like the player that he was on Cloud9 and is the same person. Is the same person. Is at the same caliber of play that he was playing it with on
yeah,
Team Liquid in those first few titles. But Impact, you never really have to worry that if you leave the top side of the map alone, that Impact won't fare well. At worst, if Impact is getting camped, he'll go down and farm like any good top laner should.
yeah,
But he will be able to be relevant in the game by himself, which allows Svenskeren to be helping out laners like Jizuke, helping out laners like Deathly, where Deathly might not be the best AD carry in the league, but he's a good AD carry, and he's only aided by definitely a not a rookie support in Ignar. Uh, I
far from
think
it,
this
yeah.
roster kind of has a really, really good chance of showing us some upsets here.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that spirit of things, I know we always cap this off with who our fantasy picks are going to be. And I think my fantasy pick from this team has to be Jizuke. I think with his hopeful synergy with Svenskeren and how we expect that to work well with Ignar, definitely, I think he can play a weak ADC role. I don't think Ignar has to be there at all times. I think he's okay staying alive and getting his farm and slowly getting there, doing damage to
Yeah.
Baron sort of thing. Um, I think Jizuke might end up being the focus, so that coin ends up being kind of rigged in your favor a little bit.
A little weighted.
And so that's my pick because if he pops off, like we said, he suddenly turns into one of the most dangerous mid laners in the LCS. It's kind of my push for fourth mid laner sort of thing. And maybe not exactly. We still have Pobelter in the mix, right? But I mean, he's up there. So if I'm going for it, maybe I can't get a top three mid laner on my draft. Jizuke is immediately where my thoughts go.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that assessment. And Jizuke has this thing, like we mentioned, where he's such a coin flippy player that one week maybe he doesn't get you a whole lot of fantasy points. The next week maybe he gets you a boatload. But
Yeah,
but
exactly.
here's my logic here. Like I mentioned, I think that each of these pieces individually might not outpace other players in their role. I don't think Evil Geniuses kind of has the best player in any role or has really anyone in contention for the best player in any role. But like
Agreed.
I said, I think the thing that Evil Geniuses has going for them is map explosiveness. And I think the number one key factor to ensuring that the map stays exploded is Svenskeren, who is going to be roaming more on the map than the jungler himself. I mean, you see, Ignar is going to be in places, obviously, but Ignar will, in all likeliness, be in places with Svenskeren nearby to ensure
Hmm.
that things don't go too poorly. So I think wherever kind of evil geniuses generate advantages on the map, whether it be through the mid lane, whether it be through the bot lane, whether evil geniuses maybe show that they want Impact to harness more of carry top laners, as he's kind of been trying to play more of these past few years, I think a huge catalyst for this team's success will be Svenskeren. Not to mention that Svenskeren is a jungler. He's not going to be dying as much as Jizuke on a bad game, or probably Deathly on a bad game.
Yeah.
He's going to
Yeah.
be chilling in that jungle when Evil Genius has a bad game. So my pick is probably Svenskeren.
You have a floor and you expect it to go well either way. So
Exactly.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, no, I think either way, I
You
could
can't
totally
go
see your
wrong.
logic. I think either of those picks go well with your fantasy. I think it depends on your own draft and your who else you're competing against, what they're picking, of course. But yeah, I think Evil Geniuses low bar, get above 50% mark
Yeah.
this
And they
season.
can
I
do it.
think get to fifth place. I think this is a roster that can do that. You definitely have some teams you're going to beat. We're going to talk about them later this week, but you definitely have some teams that you need to get lucky on, and they might just get lucky and secure that relatively high position. But anyway, I think that's it from us today. It's been a great time doing this series. We're having a great time ourselves. We're going to look forward to finishing this off as the days of the week progress and have the last one ready for you all during the day of Friday before any of the games start up. But yeah, until tomorrow, I'll catch you later and have a great night.
See ya.